Hi everyone, it's Ardith. Welcome to this month's Innovations with Ardith. Do you remember Zig Clean Color markers? It's been too long since I used mine, so this month I'm making 3 floral cards that all use my zigs in some way. First I'll show you how I store my markers. This is an acrylic cutlery caddy that has one side with no divisions. This is where I store the card that has all the colors swatched out with their numbers so I can find what I'm looking for. I also have some Bristol cardstock cut down to card front size in there. On the other side, there are 3 divided areas where I keep the markers. I have my reds, yellows, orange, and pinks in one, blues, greens, and purples in the middle one, and neutral grays and browns in the third one. This is easy to use and it keeps them all in one place. For my first card, I'm ready to start by stamping the Mondo Amaryllis onto some Bristol smooth cardstock. This cardstock makes all the difference when you're using your zig markers. It can withstand a little bit of water, more water than Nina, and it's so smooth that the colors blend and mix very easily on it. I'm going to color these flowers using a couple of methods with my markers. For the stem, I'm going in full strength, and I'm starting by putting down my darkest green where the shadows would be, including where that one leaf is folded over. Then I go back over it with a lighter green, and this shows you just how well these markers blend on this cardstock. I tried this earlier on Nina, thinking it was Bristol, and I couldn't figure out why it wasn't blending at all. The difference really is amazing. When I had all the dark greens done, I went back in with a very light green, just to go over the highlights and blend that out. Now for the flowers themselves, I know they're amaryllis, and I know it's not Christmas, so I'm going to try and use more lily colors to get a different look and stretch these stamps a bit. I started by putting some pink down in the deepest areas of the petals, where they fold over and where the color would be darker. Then I'm blending it out a bit with a lighter, peachier pink. To really lighten the color, I used a water brush to blend it a bit more and to draw it out to the rest of each petal. This leaves the deeper areas darker, but it also helps to draw out the color and leaves a pale pink color around the rest of the petals. I want to add a bit more depth and contrast, so I've gone back into the centers of the petals with a very deep pink. I'm also keeping the stamp packaging next to me so that I can tell what I'm looking at. I sometimes find outline flowers to be overwhelming, and I can't really tell what I'm looking at or where the shadows should be. So this is a good way to kind of keep in mind what I'm trying to do. When I got all the deep pink laid out, I drew it out a bit more with some water. And you can see I'm getting a really easy watercolor look with these markers. I went into the centers with the flowers with some deep yellow, and I watered that down a bit as well, but later on I went back in and deepened it up again. Finally, I'm using one of the mid-tone pink markers to add some shadows where the petals are overlapping each other. And again, I'll just go blend that out with a bit of water. All that does is soften the edges and make it look more like an actual shadow and less like a line of pink ink on a piece of paper. To finish this card, I cut the flowers out using the coordinating die. I popped them up on a white panel that had been trimmed with a rectangle die. Then I stamped thanks from the Totally Random Sayings Volume 3 set. I put the white panel onto a gray card base that I had stamped with some black dots from the Bokeh Dot set. And I added some sparkle with a couple of sequins from Pretty Pink Posh. For my next card, I'm using the markers on an acrylic block to create a colorful background. I started with yellow. It's my center color, but because it's the lightest one, I wanted to do that first. Then I put some pink at the top and some green underneath and a deeper green on the very bottom. To activate the ink, I gave it a spritz with some water. And now I'm just going to flip the block over onto some watercolor cardstock. Now I don't want to lift this up right away. You can see that if you lift it up, the ink will kind of move away and pool. So I left it to sit and really let those colors soak into the watercolor cardstock. But when it was completely dry, I stamped the amaryllis with VersaFine Onyx ink and my mini Misty. This technique is really simple, but so pretty and fresh. To add a bit of depth, I took the lightest gray zig marker and I went into those same areas where I thought there would be shadows. This helps to give a bit more definition and dimension to the flower, and it's really easy to do. To finish this card, I stamped Happy Birthday from the Totally Random Sayings Volume 3 set. I trimmed the panel down and I put it onto a gray card base. And I added some sequins. For my final card, I moved over to the Mondo Chrysanthemum stamp. This is a beautiful big flower that is perfect as a focal point. I stamped it onto some Bristol cardstock and then again onto a piece of scrap paper to create a mask. I cut the mask really roughly because I'm going to create a splattered background, and I don't really mind if some of the splatter goes on the edges of the flower. Okay, so this mask looks used, and that's because I had a little trouble remembering when my camera was turned on and when it wasn't. So this is actually the second time I'm doing this splattering. I scribbled some of the zig ink onto an acrylic block, and then I gave it a tiny spritz of water. I still really wanted to have quite a bit of pigment in these colors and not have them too soft. Then I picked up the ink with a paintbrush and I tapped it on my finger to get a very fine splatter all over the white panel. I went back in and did the same technique with a pink marker and then finally with a yellow one. This turned out to be very subtle and it just added a bit of interest to the background. Now you don't have to color this flower at all. It's pretty as it is, but I really like how easy it is just to add gray shadows and make this flower pop and look dimensional. To finish this card, I trimmed the panel down to a 4x4-inch square, and I cut the chrysanthemum out from the center with the coordinating die. I popped the flower up with foam tape, and then I added a With Sympathy sentiment from Totally Random Sayings Volume 3. I embossed the sentiment with Wow embossing powder in white on that same gray cardstock, and I popped it up in the bottom corner. So here are all three of my panels that serve as a reminder that there's quite a number of techniques that you can do with Zig Clean color markers. So if, like me, you haven't used yours in a while, or if you're new to them, get them out and give them a try. I know you'll love the results. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's fun to dig out our old supplies and refresh our memories and try some new techniques and have some fun. Product supplies are listed below and also on the blog. Thanks so much for stopping by. See you next time.